The monumental buildings of Giza still leave us in awe today. And yet, there are people who believe that the pyramids and the like represent only the tiniest tip of the ancient Egyptian iceberg. And this is meant quite literally, because some time ago, archaeologists finally set foot in the hidden underworld of the Giza Plateau and brought something amazing to light. But what is the truth behind the eerie tomb of the gods, the existence of which was categorically ruled out for so long? How could it be directly connected to the mysterious Sphinx, and what wondrous things might still lie dormant under the paws of the stone hybrid? Many an ancient structure stands in the proverbial shadow of its more famous counterparts. Or have you heard of the Tomb of Osiris? This mysterious underground complex is just as much a part of the Giza Plateau as the Great Pyramid of Cheops and the Sphinx, and yet it is far less in the spotlight than the colossal structures above ground. And that, although the existence of this mysterious complex was actually handed down thousands of years ago, unfortunately researchers sometimes tend to dismiss the reports of our ancestors as unfounded fantasies. This was also the case for Herodotus, who traveled around the land of the pharaohs around 450 BC and immortalized his experiences for posterity in his second book of Histories. In this work, the Greek historian also reported on a mystical tomb under the rocky hill on which the Great Pyramids are enthroned. And in this tomb, Herodotus wrote, an artificial lake surrounds an island where Pharaoh Cheops was buried. And although the ancient records were available to us in the centuries that followed, they ultimately had a small but crucial flaw. No one believed that the site described by Herodotus really existed. In fact, it took over 2,000 years before the historian's account was finally brought back to reality. In 1933, the Egyptologist Selim Hassan managed to track down the hidden site, and thus reminded the world once again that we should not always immediately relegate the reports of the past to the realm of myths and legends. Regarding his sensational discovery, Hassan assumed that the tomb complex dates back to the 26th dynasty, and thus to the period around 500 BC. However, other researchers have their doubts about this dating, and consider it more likely that the site is in fact significantly older. In the mysterious interior of the Osiris tomb, it is indisputable that the rediscovery of the hidden tomb was an archaeological sensation either way, but it is also undisputed that the site is equally confusing and enigmatic, and continues to fuel the wildest theories to this day. If you will, the complex resembles a winding labyrinth of tunnels and chambers, and even the descent through the shaft into the rocky underground is a dizzying adventure. And while there are only a few photos and film recordings of this testimony carved into the stone, the Egyptologist Zahi Hawass devoted himself to the task of uncovering the long-forgotten secrets of the Osiris tomb from 2008 onwards. Basically, the complex consists of 3 different levels, one of which goes deeper than the other. And while the chamber of the first level measures about 4 by 10 meters, it is, mysteriously, completely empty. You won't find any mystical funerary texts, precious grave goods, or even a sarcophagus here. But luckily, the chamber of the second level is a bit better equipped. However, to reach it, you have to descend one of 2 iron ladders that have seen better days. Once you arrive at the bottom, 18 meters below the surface, you will finally see a 5 by 8 meter large cavity divided into 8 niches. The postures and bones found and analyzed here led experts to believe that the tomb was built in the late period of ancient Egypt. The mortal remains that rest in the massive granite sarcophagus in niche number 2 also belong to said bones. But what lies behind this coffin is possibly even more significant. In detail, the object blocks a narrow passage measuring approximately 80 by 100 centimeters, which leads to the east, and thus exactly in the direction of the Valley Temple and the Sphinx. In the same breath, it appears that the coffin was pushed into the passage with such force that it broke. Many a skeptical mind suspects that this was not an accident, but rather the deliberate creation of a barrier. Combined with the fact that only authorized persons are allowed to enter the site anyway, the alternative camp wonders why this passage, of all places, was blocked. Or to put it another way, what is slumbering in the Osiris tomb that the rest of the world is not allowed to see, let alone explore? But let's continue reading. The second and last granite sarcophagus of the second level is located in niche number 7, and it is empty. And just like the level above, this one also appears strangely bare and unadorned. In fact, it is precisely this simplicity that raises the first doubts about the date of origin around the year 500 BC. During this period, the Egyptians usually decorated their tombs with cartouches, colorful reliefs, and countless inscriptions. But there is none of this in the Osiris tomb. The bare ceilings, walls, floor, and sarcophagi are more reminiscent of the buildings of much older dynasties, such as the pyramids of Giza, the Serapeium of Saqqara, and the Osirion in Abydos. With the knowledge that ancient Egyptian burial sites were often used multiple times, it seems possible that the analyzed ceramic and bone remains also come from much younger burials, and that the age determination is consequently not correct. But be this as it may, there is one point we have not yet addressed in detail. Why is the site called the Osiris tomb at all? Well, to understand this, we have to delve even deeper underground and take a look at what is probably the most enigmatic of all levels: the tomb of the god. Not even the god of the dead is immune to death. Although Osiris is considered the ruler of the afterlife in Egyptian mythology, he is said to have been murdered by his own brother, Seth. But that's not all. In his boundless rage, Seth then also dismembered the body of Osiris and scattered it throughout the land. Fortunately for us, Osiris had a sister-in-law, Isis, who gathered up the remains of her husband and, with the help of the god Anubis, brought him back to life. So far, so mythological. But in fact, the belief in the god of the dead was so deeply rooted in the consciousness of the ancient Egyptians that they even built him a separate burial place. However, it is said to have not been the real final resting place of a living deity, but a purely symbolic tomb, slumbering in the lowest level of the hidden complex at Giza. Those who descend the 2 by 2 meter shaft in niche number 4 on the second level will not only find themselves 30 meters below ground, but also at the actual heart of the site. And while the upper passages are characterized by barren stone, down here the preferred element is water. A splashing problem that Salim Hassan was also confronted with. He had tried to completely drain the chamber, but after the pumps had been running for no less than 4 years, he had to realize that he would not win the battle against the water. According to Herodotus' reports, it is only logical that this area of the complex is so dripping wet. After all, the old Greek did tell of a burial island in the middle of an artificial lake. Nevertheless, the water in this spacious chamber is likely to be much higher today than in Herodotus' time. And in fact, the experts cannot even say for sure where that water comes from. What is certain, however, is that the traces of the past are still visible down here. The lid of the Osiris tomb still protrudes a little way out of the water. The rest of the coffin and the island mentioned by Herodotus, on the other hand, are completely flooded. The unsolved mysteries of the past. Although the nature of the site matches the ancient records, it does raise a number of questions, some of which are of a very practical nature. How did the Egyptians manage to maneuver the granite sarcophagus, which weighs an estimated 10 to 15 tons, to such a depth? And then there is the fact that the finds recorded here have been dated to an age of 5,000 years, which makes them about twice as old as the artifacts from the second level. And who knows, maybe the rest of the site holds the answers to these and many other unanswered questions, but unfortunately we simply cannot reach them. The eastern wall of the Osiris burial chamber contains another narrow passage that reaches a no less narrow vault after about 20 meters. From here, a shaft measuring just 40 by 40 centimeters leads north towards the Great Pyramid of Giza, and another equally small shaft leads east towards the Sphinx. During his exploration, Zahi Hawass naturally also wanted to know what these passages were for, which is why he unceremoniously sent a young boy in, who promptly got stuck and had to be pulled out by the legs. And even today, we cannot say what these mysterious passageways mean. Some people suspect that they are part of an extensive underground network that is directly connected to the legendary Hall of Records. It is said that this is a mystical storehouse of knowledge, the entrance to which is hidden under the paws of the Sphinx and which testifies that the Egyptians were significantly influenced by a lost predecessor culture. But there is another way, no less controversial, but different. For many, an alternative spirit does not recognize the Osiris tomb as a symbolic burial place of a god, but as proof that the Egyptians were in possession of futuristic technologies. The crazy theories do not even stop at fully functional dimensional portals, which, however, were hermetically sealed by an ancient technological process. But even aside from these wacky conjectures, the tomb of Osiris leaves some fundamental questions unanswered. Why did Herodotus write that Cheops was buried down here when he had his own, not exactly modest pyramid? Furthermore, the pharaoh lived around 4,500 years ago, while the lowest part of the complex is at least 500 years older. And last but not least, there is the question of how the Egyptians managed to carve out such tiny shafts when not even children can get through the small passageways. But now you can get going and click on the subscription button. Become part of our community and never miss a new video from us again.